those terminal skills because it makes a world of difference. But when Kelly and I spoke, and this was just, I reached out to her, told her about Women in AI Futures, and wanted her to be on the panel with the panel that was yesterday. But as we were speaking, I was like, oh no, we need our own conversation. We need to repeat this conversation and I think it's a very fitting way to end the week based on everything that has happened over the last 3 days. So 3 days of learning to think, evaluate, and then lead with AI. Then yesterday was what's the innovation, the funding that's happening, and then today for our founders. So I want to take this moment, Kelly, so if you can join me on our main stage here. Kelly Flynn, let's give it up for Kelly as we were rounding out. I know y'all, hold on. We're almost there. We got some celebrating to do. Oh, come closer. I'm surprised that Jeff didn't say anything because he's always been saying like, you need to get closer.
Yeah, the first time I ever did it and I'm kind of sure like this.
Yeah.
In front of a large audience, I tripped, fell, and fell off the chair.
So now you're nervous, very, very mindful of when you get up.
There's only one way to recover for that, and I did it not even thinking about it, which is to immediately stand up, throw your hands in the air and say, yeah!
And then you gotta praise that, right? Like, okay, she's cool people. All right, so there are new people, new recording, all of the things. Kisasa. Before, let's, because this conversation is built differently. So can we get the origin stories before Kisasa?
Yeah, okay. So the professional origin story is fairly short-ish, which is I'm calling now, so I bounce from thing to thing to thing based on the tides, the wind, and my mood. So, and I absorb an amazing amount of stuff, and I'm a natural pattern recognizer. So I absorb a lot of new data, and then my brain just kind of correlates it all one way or another, and most times doing stuff. So I started my tech career about 2 years after college. My background is in environmental education. So again, ecosystem maker, everything matches, whole bunch rather than anything else. So started in Silicon Valley working, actually kind of randomly fell into it, I did a job.
Okay.
But I've kind of been in technology ever since, and now I'm like a 4-time founder. Started my first company at 18. Sold it when I graduated from college. So I put myself through college on my own company, as well as three other jobs. But I kind of just wandered through a lot of things, and now I'm 54, and I'm looking at I'm on my laptop. So in that mode right now, it's awesome. But from an experiential perspective, though, I was raised in California in a small town, the second smallest county by population in California. My father was a geotechnical engineer. He owned his own firm. This generation of my family to work in some form of engineering or engineering adjacent type of thing. I'm the 7th generation of my family to a small business owner. So
it's in there.
It's in there. It really is. I'm also one of those people that I cannot stand looking at problems that shouldn't exist. And problems that's nobody solved this, they think it's complicated. My approach to problem solving in general, all the way through my entire career and frankly my life, is to solve problems kind of nerves. People solve problems by looking at the top, and they kind of try to whittle around the edges to solve the problem, hoping that something else works out. I'm one of the people that actually looks at the bottom of the fundamental top situation, the building blocks and how the building blocks got assembled, and look at my mind and say, eliminate the stuff that gets closer, so you just put it to the side of the dressing, and focus on the fundamentals and simplicity around things. So I kind of
You said you've always, that's always been, okay.
Yeah, it's a fully natural, I don't think about it, I didn't think I realized it until like 30.
Okay.
No, I was like ADHD, I'm a late diagnosis of your accident actually. So, on top of that, I tend to be a very kind of random thinker that I don't think in linear ways. I think in terms of almost like a 3-dimensional view of associations and ways to plug into each other. So
did you, even though you were diagnosed in your 30s after the car accident, did you know there was something different about how you thought about things, or just me and, okay, now you put a title, but I always knew that? Or did you now like, oh, now you embrace it as a superpower?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was actually diagnosed in my 40s.
Okay.
I had a massive car accident and got a TBI, traumatic injury. And when all the healing was done with brain injury, I went back to my neuropsychologist and said, well, I'm still feeling like I'm really scattered. And he literally looked at me and said, have you told you had ADHD? Like, that would be nice.
Right.
So, you never tell what life-changing things actually come out like that. So, but it did make a lot more sense all of a sudden, especially since now there's emerging research showing how it manifests very differently. I actually read a study recently that showed that a lot of women who are getting late diagnoses have throughout their life been labeled as bipolar or psychopathic. Because of the fact that their brains don't think the same way, don't communicate the same way. And because we've had a history of saying ADHD kids are little boys in the back of the classroom who can't sit still. And so as a result, we're not recognizing it in women, we're not seeing it manifest differently, and as a result, it's like a mental illness, not a superpower.
Yeah.
So bad.
So you said just how you have moved through the world, and specifically when there's a problem, you get to the foundation. So what was the foundation that you saw that then Kisasa came to life?
Yeah, it was actually a conversation I had a few years ago with somebody, and we were talking about like solving the problem. I honestly don't even remember what the problem was, and going back and forth about it. And somebody walked up and kind of was hovering nearby, and I kind of interrupted this really briefly. And said, you know that the person fixing that problem is like 2 buildings away, right? And I've been chewing on that for a long time, especially as I'm fairly embedded in this kind of small business startups in Atlanta, where we're BC, we were tech park, like kind of all everywhere. And I realized that is actually an incredibly common pattern. That's a problem. That we're going and searching for money, we're searching for resources, we're starving, we're doing all this kind of stuff that founders are supposed to do. What we're not doing is looking for the people next door. We are not looking for the resources that are sitting there.
So the problem wasn't Kisasa yet, it was just the fact that whatever you were working on, someone said, oh yeah, that person,
Yeah.
moves away.
It was like, we don't know who people are, we don't know what organizations are, and frankly, the internet has gotten slow enough and large enough that finding them on the internet is a little bit harder than it used to be.
Right.
So, when you look at that kind of problem, start saying, okay, what do you do to improve that? How do you do that? I'm one of those people that very much doesn't look for the reasons not to do something. I very much look for there's a problem, let's fix it. If it blows up, we'll fix that later. Kind of a thing. And so we originally started with 2.5 years ago with our Kisasa Hub, which we're acquiring, which is an operating system that brings the community into the operating system. So, it's a web application, you can set up a browser window, you can
So sorry, if we take a step back and what is Kisasa?
So what happens when you live here? Kisasa is a SaaS application, we're company based here in Georgia. It's a SaaS application that, from the front end, from a user's perspective, is 2 different products. Kisasa Hub and Kisasa Ecosystem. Kisasa Hub is our operating system. Basically a single browser window with 50 applications. It adapts to ADHD brains, which is to say you get to pick the interface to match however your brain matches. You can move things around, you can split them up, do whatever you want to. It doesn't actually change it. It's 2 people, totally different brains, working on the same applications on the same project, both keeping their perspective and way of processing information intact at the same time. For example, we run our own company out of it, use my own product. You scrape any time that doesn't. I use my own product, and my hub looks exactly the way I want it to right here. Everything is, I know why it's next to each other. It makes perfect sense to me. My CPO pen is like much more linear thinking for classic engineer. His is perfectly neat and organized. Everything is lined up perfectly. It's divided out by category of organisms, applications. He thinks mine looks like that. Yeah, he thinks mine looks like an access world. I think this is but we can still operate cleanly. It doesn't. The interface is not getting in the way, basically. And we actually built our AI first. There were two things we started the company with. One was figuring out programming, just like logos and stuff, and Kiki, our little game, who's our mascot. The second thing we built the AI. We actually built the AI for the application.
And why was that?
Because I like to tackle the hardest stuff first, because the easiest stuff I can get to later. Most likely it's not the thing that's going to blow stuff up. It's the hard stuff that we avoid doing because it's hard that blows things up later. So I would think about tackling the hard stuff first. The AI was going to be the hardest part. It was 2.5 years ago. So it was just starting to get into
what we could make accessible and cost efficient.
Right. So we did Kiki, and she was our lead was the onboarding agent. Because we realized when talking to people in our community that LinkedIn has become the resume. Like nobody had to be able to CV for an application recently, and I was like, I haven't done this in 15 years. So when you have that as being the resume and all that, because it's so public, it becomes kind of acting stupid in a way. I mean, how many of us, even if you're being like fairly honest in your LinkedIn profile, how many of us don't like build that for the audience? I've done all kinds of things that don't appear anywhere in my LinkedIn profile. That's awesome. So we're not getting an honest depiction of people's skill sets and what they're coming to the table with. And because the operating system side brings community into the operating environment and didn't separate the two. Every member of the platform is connected to every other member, regardless, but you can still do either work in the same space. So we removed the barrier between the two things, basically. So what we did is actually programmed to be a flipped interaction AI. She asks the question, she guides the conversation. So it's not the user that is asking the AI, it's the AI is asking the user instead. And her job is to get skill sets. Our profiles are all skill-based. What can you do? Well, one of the things that people don't realize about shame when it comes to skill sets and feeling like we're adequate is that when we avoid addressing or avoid acknowledging a gap in knowledge, we add shame to that. It instantaneously becomes a shame.
Wait, you need to say that again.
When we don't acknowledge the lack of knowledge, when we don't say, okay, you don't know that, cool. We trigger the shame. We make it a shameful thing by essentially assigning it that notion. And when you do that, you get a really good idea of the skill set, because people either pump up their skills or avoid addressing the opposite knowledge. That's not a good thing because you can't really form communities of practice, essentially formal and informal, unless you know your gaps.
Yeah.
It's not possible to do.
That's funny, because I was just telling Candace how I feel like this week, of course, building up to it, it's just been professional development and all of the gaps and all of the things that, the things that I need, lots of amazing things, but you might need to work on that one, and your communication skills could be a lot better. And just but admitting those things.
Yeah, it's something really, I think even using the term of admitting those things, you're still like, that puts a culture of shame on top of it. We use that word all the time, but we're doing that, you admit to breaking the law.
So acknowledge, what's that way to?
It's acknowledgement, and that's exactly what we program Kiki to do.
Okay.
When she's walking through and asking the user about their skill set, what have you done? And these kinds of things, she's running a script in the background for all intents and purposes. But we programmed her to do what we call acknowledgement deflect.
Okay.
Which is to say, when she's going through and asking you, for example, do you know anything about finance? And you say, no. She'll say, okay, that's great. We have people who can help you with that. What do you know about marketing? So she immediately acknowledges the gap and pivots into the next topic. So she's not avoiding it and just moving on. She's specifically designed to say, got it. I see that, that's not a big deal, react to it.
That was intentional.
Totally intentional.
So then, in building Kasasa, what would you say are maybe some challenges that you have faced that might not be public, but beneficial for our learning?
Yeah, there's a lot of them. It's like, every day is a new challenge, and if you don't know what they are, then you're not paying enough attention, is what it comes down to. Challenges, either from the company or from the build or personally. There's kind of.
Yeah, I like that. What do you want to share with us? You've been in the room all day, so.
I have. So there's a couple of challenges. Personal.
One like business wise and one personal.
Okay, that helps. I'm gonna have them as a yeah.
That's right. We're right here.
Gotta have some of this. Me and it's either chaos or brilliance, one of the two at the end of the day. So okay. One of the things that I always challenge personally is imposter syndrome. I am a long generation of working with men. The other inventors and entrepreneurs in my lineage are all men. I stick with men. Bunch. And I've always been very attracted to engineering versus I'm not a GP. You want me to mince my words just so as to be better, right? Or do it in writing so that I can actually spend 45 minutes assessing over a 5 sentence, like you know. But so for me, I feel that very definitely, and I will replay rejection over and over and over in my head, and it takes me a long time to shake it, oftentimes. And you add that to, I'm actually an audience user, you add that to an autistic thing, it's like there's breakups at home. So it's really hard to be kind myself regarding that, and also saying that people making negative comments, it's just feedback at the end. It has equal value for things, and it should. So when we put out the Kasasa Hub, it's a very, very different application. It's built differently from the beginning. We have AI and we'll way through it. We use it largely for background layers, validation of data, and things like that. There's not actually a whole lot of our AI that actually is inherent in the application itself. The problem we've had with Hub originally was the fact that it's one of those things that makes sense when you talk about it. Like, absolutely, you stick all your stuff in one place, it goes anywhere, or any browser. You can run your entire business out your phone or a library, even as long as you use your browser, you can do it. The problem is there's nothing else in the market that does that way. Like, it isn't a thing. And so when we're talking about it and explaining it, it's a relatively complex kind of construct in a way. Complex and deadly simple at the same time, and most people have trouble parsing. So that's been a big challenge, and then ecosystem is my ecosystem is probably more practical and easy to understand project, even though it has the same design mechanism, huge amounts of resources. So that's been a huge challenge because people do approach and do feel skeptical. It's like, really, maybe about that. You couldn't possibly.
And so you actually also had, I would say a win. At least I remember seeing a post a couple, well, let's back up. So last fall, a win with Startup Atlanta. And then also recently, as we get ready for FIFA and World Cup and all the things, the project in Woodstock.
Yeah, Woodstock.
Yeah.
It's actually in Atlanta overall, but yeah. So we tend to do, like, we've had to, instead of telling people about our product a whole lot, we've had to make it very widely available so that people can actually use it. Because what better way to show the capabilities of your product than putting it in the public? So the Startup Atlanta, we had actually built a product right now in July. It was pretty much built completely by the end of August. And there's a whole story about that being some fairness gaming from me being like technologically offended by the competition we're in. So I did it better. we wanted to make sure when we released it that we weren't doing a soft release or anything like that. We wanted to make sure we had an anchor customer who was a name.
Okay.
Because of some politics and things like that were going on in the startup community at that time, which Startup Atlanta ended up being on the like rather pushed to the outside in some very interesting ways. Whole story there. We approached Startup Atlanta and said, here, I'm waiting for an anchor. I want to have a name brand when we go, so I'm going without with a large customer in place. Tell you what, I'll make it work for what. And so we did it for free as a co-branded ecosystem. And I even told them one reason they went ahead with it is we actually gave them more than an opportunity, but they can actually raise money off of it. They have the ability to be able to support things like advertisement and increase levels of sponsorship and sponsor us, we'll put you on the ecosystem. Not to mention, they got a good deal of attention for the fact that we found, while the competition that was due to Atlanta thought they could come up with about 250 resources for helping start here, we found almost 1,300 attractions today. So that was a big splash for us against a lot of attention. Some people were very unhappy with us when we launched it like that because we ended up making a competitive move by essentially making the competition relevant. We beat the market.
Well, and when we look at this entire week, and again, the last 48 hours of our in-person conversations, there's so much happening, so much uncertainty. That's why this is like, you did something different. You didn't do it the way that it has been.
Yeah, it's kind of a, I think one of the things you see, one of the things we're talking about AI development in general, two things. First of all, my QA problem. We're doing, you want to know who the hero of the AI is going to be, it's going to be the QA engineer. Because nobody's QAing their stuff. They're assuming it works fine. And that's a very dangerous thing to get into, especially when you're dealing with inputs. So, I'm not on that side. I think AI is kind of an interesting thing from a sociological perspective because we've taken the guardrails off. We've told people they can build anything they want, but we're telling a society that is very much built on here are walls. There are walls in your buildings, there are things that keep you inside a certain level of knowledge, thought process, creativity, etc. When you look at AI, people are still doing that. They're just translating what they've been taught by society for years, which is there are walls, there are limits, there are things you should not do. What they're not doing is saying, why? Why is there a wall? Is the wall really a problem? And more to the point, what really happens if I don't pay attention to it?
It sounds like a Disney movie somewhere.
Yeah.
What happens when you go outside of the scene?
Yeah, it really kind of is. It's very much we're still looking at it as if it has barriers. It does not. And you really have to think in terms of what's the benefit. To stretch your brain, and it has to be a deliberate activity until you kind of figured out how to do it automatically. And that only happens by practicing. This thing, if I ignore that entirely, what's going to go wrong? And am I willing to live with what's wrong? How do I manage that? And that actually takes all the way back, I'm circling back from a history perspective. I did a year of teaching 8th grade science. Still the best job I've ever had. I would do it in a heartbeat. Unfortunately, the area that I was living in California, being a teacher qualified for food stamps. So was not going to work out long term. But I still love it. It's very much, I love to teach. I love to do hands-on education and such. And I went in my class, I had one class that was 35 gifted and talented kids. So 35 8th grade, fully hormonal, completely unsure of themselves, neurotic kids with neurotic parents. I have two myself now, so it's pretty much so good. And one of her, Catherine Bevelata, I still keep in touch with her on LinkedIn, even after all these years. Absolutely one of the most brilliant minds I've ever worked with, even at that age. Like, just absolutely phenomenal. getting incredibly worried about being control. And she came to me one day and she was stressed out about class. She's like, I gotta do this, I gotta do this, I gotta build this. And I just said, so I'm gonna give you an assignment, I'm gonna wait the assignment you have for me. And I'm gonna give you another assignment, I want you to go home and sit down and be quiet with this, and take out a piece of paper. I'm gonna write down everything that could possibly go wrong. Everything you can think of that could possibly go wrong if this week doesn't go well. Like, if you fail, if you don't do what people are telling you to do, what's gonna happen? I still have a photocopy of that 2 pages of her coming up with everything from, I could turn green, there could be a meteor, the world could come by, I could discover the dinosaurs are still alive and rampaging in the sewers. It goes everywhere from like the practicality of I will never get into college, at 8th grade, this child is stressing about that, to like the absolute absurd, and it gets more absurd as it goes on. And when she came back and gave it back to me, I made her keep it, the original, because I shut the class of it. But it came down, she was like, I was much more relaxed now, because now I've identified what goes wrong, and I know which parts I really need to worry about, and I know how to recover from them. I know now how to proactively decide what's going to go bad, because I've thought through to the level of absurdity what could be going on. And that's it's a very much a philosophy I've always had, and so it was like the very first time I articulated it, especially. But it's something I do every single time I build. Every single thing I build, I take a reductionist point into it, and just be very and then I start figuring out what's going to go wrong. Is it going to be that bad? How would I recover from it? And if it's something I can't recover from, it's going to be catastrophic. Okay, might not want to do that in exactly the same way.
But it just helps you to restructure and you just not only get to the other side of this if it's a thing.
Yeah, but it also frees your mind.
Right.
That's the thing. When you identify the demon isn't scary anymore. That's really what it comes down to. And so it really removes the walls and restrictions. And I think that's one of the things we, especially as women, because we're trained in a very strict set of paradigms. From birth giving, you're supposed to be pure, you're supposed to be pleasant, you're supposed to be kind, generous, blah, blah, blah. Yes,
all of those things. I want to make sure that any questions before I get to my final one for Kelly, because I'm about to hit you. As we're wrapping up the last moment of Women in AI Futures Weekend. So hold on a moment. All right. There we go. Okay. So the women in the room have spent the last 5 days building skills, getting certified, making decisions about where their careers and the business go from here. What is the one thing you want to leave with them?
it's actually an assignment. Girl, do you homework? Let's see the teacher. I want you to go home and sit someplace quiet, noisy, whatever your jam is. I cope with like very loud music in the background, works for me. Whatever relaxes you, sit down with a piece of paper and pen and pencil. Don't put it on your computer. Do it mechanically. It's actually, from a learning perspective, that's actually better. Don't let anybody bug you. Grab a glass of wine or whatever you do, and write down what you're doing right now, what you're doing in tech, what you're building. What scares you? Where is it going to go wrong? And let yourself be absurd by all means. It is incredibly powerful and incredibly motivating to have a physical artifact of that. Because you know what? I still refer to mine. I refer to ones that I did years ago. I'm not a journaler, I can't keep up with that, but I have a bunch of these that are all over the place that are an idea that I just literally got stressed about it, sat down, wrote down all the absurd things that could happen if you go wrong. And they're not scary anymore. It removes the limits because we need to make sure that if we're checking ourselves, if we're building and playing with something like AI, we need to make sure that we're approaching it without the paradigms that society gives us, and gives us, not without that weight. We have to have that out of our brains so we truly take advantage of all of the opportunities that AI and make sure that we keep it, go back to it on days where you're just like, I hate this, I'm gonna go back to my old job, or I'm burning cash like mad, this is gonna make me broke. Whenever you have that tension moment, go back.
Go back to the artifact, so just repeating, so find a piece of paper or a journal, whatever that is, your digital, and just sit down and write all the things that scare you about whatever this thing is that you're building.
Yeah, I'm scared here, what's gonna go wrong? And be sure about it, because honestly, it makes more fun. Be ridiculous about it, use your imagination, be silly, you don't ever have to give it to anybody else, so it's absolutely ridiculous if you go. Do you recommend that you go non-digital though?
Yeah.
It's a much better experience if you go non-digital. I say that from somebody who has the worst handwriting experience. But it's a much better experience. People think more creatively when this is the digital elements and them and just pure on.
Kevin, Flynn, it's awesome. Thank you.
And I'll be around for this if you have questions.
Yeah. Wait, you've been here all the 2 days. You know the picture's coming, right?
It's scary, I realize it. Okay, that's what I'm doing.
Okay, cool. So I'm gonna take just a 120-second break to just reset. And then we're gonna wrap up this wonderful week experience.
I want to do those same 3 again. So.